Quip, makers of the Quip electric toothbrush, make good habits simple with the new brush head, floss refill, and toothpaste delivered every 3 months. Sets start at $25. Get your first refill free at getquip.com/auto. That's getquip.com/auto.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Autoblog Podcast. This is episode 609. I'm Greg Migliore. Happy New Year. Joining me today in the studio is senior editor for All Things Green, Beltz Snyder. What's up, man?
Hey, happy 2020. Glad to be here.
It's about time we did a podcast, right?
Yeah.
We took a very long holiday break. Laughing along merrily on the phone is senior editor Alex Kierstein.
Okay, I'm not even going to try. Hi, guys. How's it going?
Well, Santa came like 2-3 weeks ago now. So, our tree is actually still up. We're going to be taking it down shortly, but it's an artificial, so it's really easy to leave that up.
Oh, there you go.
The other lights are down, though, for the record. Anyways, we got a great show for you today. We are going to talk more about holiday decorations. I'll leave out the episode of that time I left my Christmas lights up until St. Patrick's Day. It was 65 degrees, and I took them down in my shorts. It seemed like a great idea. I don't know. You guys ever do anything like that?
I generally don't bother putting up decorations, at least on the outside of the house. We do the tree and then maybe a little knick-knack here and there inside, and that's it.
I suppose. I mean, that's reasonable. Anyways, we got a great show for you today. It's CES. So we got a couple thoughts on what's going on from Las Vegas. But do come back next week. We had video producer Alex Malberg and assistant editor Zach Palmer were on the ground there. They got to see, feel, and touch all the cool things. So, we'll definitely have more with them. But we're going to give you what we think of it from Michigan and from Seattle. So, for whatever that's worth, we're going to talk about that. And then we do have to get to the big news of the week. Carlos Ghosn, the saga has taken a very interesting turn. He spoke publicly today this is basically the first time he's really spoken out with any sort of extended length. I think he issued like a kind of a cryptic statement before, but he was always either under arrest, in jail, or some sort of house arrest. So now that he has made it out of Japan, he's speaking his mind. Lots of interesting things. You got to check out the story on our site, but we're going to try and at least synthesize some of that. I mean, this is like, I believe he's already signed a deal with Netflix. Is that true? Or was that like a joke?
No, I don't think that's a joke.
It happened.
Awesome. So I literally can't wait to stream that. In the meantime, we're going to talk about it. And then we will talk about all of the cars we've been driving, which is quite a few. I spent the holidays in the Genesis G70. This is the manual transmission. It was bright red. It looked like a sleigh. And it had the 2-liter. So it was a pretty fun car. I really enjoyed it. I took a lot of handwritten notes on coasters and other small wrinkled papers. Not the most scientific way to do it. Alex is going to talk about the Chevy Blazer that he currently is driving. He used to drive one. I believe he owned one. Is that correct?
That's correct. At a 2003.
When you started here, you had a Blazer, right?
Yeah. It was a 2003 green. Yeah, that's about all there is to say about it. It was a Blazer.
All right, yeah. So, just to be clear, you're going to talk about the new one, though, right?
Yeah, I'll talk about the new one. I mean, we could talk about my 2003. That was an interesting vehicle, but I'll talk about the new one.
I had a mid-90s model. It was my first car.
All right.
Yeah.
That's kind of, I mean, we're talking about the Blazer, but probably not the one.
No.
But then, people do care about the 90s and the 2000s. They're cool again. What are the Wallflowers doing right now? What do you think?
Oh, are they still alive?
Well, they're our age, so I hope so. Yeah, I don't know. And then we will end with the Hyundai Santa Fe.
Yeah.
John and I both drove that. Pretty nice crossover. We do have some very cool spend your money. You do want to stick around for that. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. But anyways, let's jump right into CES. I think this is one of the better CESs I could recall. Just, it seems like every day there's an interesting new tech or an interesting new straight up concept car. I think this is among the most concept cars I think I've ever seen at CES. Usually it's just all this latest new haptic touchscreen, this or this tech company is going to do this to your car and not steal all your data and sell it to people. This year was legit cars, which I thought was really cool. We had some news out of Jeep with the plugins, like their plan for that, which I think is a really smart move for them. But John, real quick, what'd you think?
I dig it. I dig some of these cars that are coming out. The Mercedes-Benz Vision Avatar, the AVTR.
Aviator. No, I like the Avatar.
That one's pretty cool. Sony car is kind of interesting. Fisker Ocean's cool. Lots of actual cars and not just a bunch of autonomous tech and plugins and things. There's still some flying cars, but not quite as many as in years past. Or maybe they're just not as exciting as they were a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, any show that's dropping its flying car content, I don't know. What's the world coming to? Alex, what do you think?
I have to say that while a lot of the auto content that came out of the show, not to diminish the coolness or the importance, was, kind of expected. There's stuff about Faraday Future. There's, Nissan's talking about its dual motor system. A few things that we kind of expected. I am just blown away by the Sony car. I think it looks really cool. The response to it's been amazing. This came completely out of left field. And what I've been thinking about all day is Sony doesn't want to build it, right? They've said we don't want to build it. It can drive, but that's as far as we're going to take it. Part of me thinks it might be amazing if a legacy electronics company just dropped into the automotive space and just did it and said, we do consumer electronics. An EV is a consumer electronic. This concept in my mind nails it out of the park. It looks great. It looks like something that a lot of these startups haven't been able to do, which is make something look really, really elegant. And apparently it was styled in-house. I know Zach's at the show right now. There might be more detail about who designed it on the site by the time you listen to this podcast. But at the moment, all we know is that it was in-house design, and it looks like a really mature and elegant design. It doesn't look very derivative. So I'd be interested to find out who actually penned it, because it looks great. What do you guys think?
I see a little bit of Tesla Model 3, especially up front, but not too much. It looks like a something I would drive. It's not too wacky or anything like that. Elegant's a good word for it. And the interior's pretty cool, as you would expect from an electronics company. That digital display, I think this is better than what the Apple car would have been. I think this is a little more soulful than that, than anything that Apple could have done. But who knows? But yeah, I would like to see something that looks like this. Whoever designed it, give them a job at a real car company.
I kind of wonder if some, either retired designer or somebody of note sort of ghost penned this or something, because this is almost too good.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a really good looking car. So props to who did that. And I actually think it's a brilliant move for Sony to use this use CES, which is sort of neutral turf for the automakers. Nobody really owns or controls CES. I think the closest approximation is maybe the Geneva Motor Show, because there's no, endemic auto company in Switzerland. And it's the same with this. And the space is just so wide open. And I think it was a great conversation starter. It's a great image elevator for Sony. I mean, when I think Sony, I think TVs, I think phones, I think, all the things you think of for Sony, and then boom, hey, Sony built a car. Well, okay, wow. And it looks like this. I mean, that's a lot. In some ways, I think they may be selling themselves short if they say, hey, we did this. We're going to talk about it for a year or two and then put it away in our museum. Well, maybe don't do that. Maybe I know we were talking earlier on Slack about how Magna and, some of the other companies are essentially coach builders that could take this idea and maybe execute it. That might be a bit far-fetched. It's building cars is hard. It's time intensive. It's complex. You have to get all the safety regulations and, all the other sort of global standards that you have to meet, that I could see why Sony's like, yeah, no, thanks. This is just to get people talking. But I like it. Looks really good.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Agreed.
What it does, what it stands for. Solid play.
Yeah, and what other product could a legacy company like Sony have built that would have made such a splat? Like if it's a new pair of VR goggles, I mean, that's what everyone expects. If it's just a round TV or something wild, again, everyone expects that at CES. But what I like about this more than anything else that came there is, Greg, exactly what you were saying, unexpected conversation starter. We're all talking about Sony. And, you think about how, people talk about the automotive adjacent space, like what a great way to get your company into another conversation, into another world. Maybe Sony will consult with other manufacturers or license a design to somebody, or decide that they can cobble together all the suppliers that are providing to the EV product, the EV stream, supplier stream already, and have a company like Valmet in Finland or Magna's in Austria, right? They contract build cars for other companies all the time. I think the idea that Sony couldn't do this is, other than the money factor, I think they could, especially with an EV, because you're not dealing with like having to have a legacy of building like internal combustion powertrains. But I'm going on. I think I've gone too much into this. I really like it. I'm excited about it. I'm going to let it sit there.
Real quick, from a business strategy standpoint, I think this is brilliant too, because they thought, hey, what's our core business? Well, it's electronics and all sorts of other things. Let's try to use this outside thing, which is building cars, and use that to try to get people talking about the other, their main business, which frankly, you don't see that much, is this like, we're in these sort of, late stage capitalism. Like companies are like, the thing right now is to be dialed in, to go deep on whatever it is that you do well and not expand. We saw companies sort of at the end of the 20th century really expanded all sorts of things. General Motors was like buying up pieces of like IBM. They had like Ross Perot on their board. Like that was the thing. In the last 20 years or so, you've seen companies really just go deep on whatever it is their main strategy is. And this is one of the few cases in recent memory I've seen where a company has been willing to take such a big risk. Maybe it's not that big a risk. We may be overstating this a little bit, but I just think it's a very smart, savvy play.
Yeah, I don't know if they expected it to get this much attention on like the car itself. They wanted to focus on the electronics within it, but this all as a whole, I think they're gonna it's gonna cross their minds at some point when they look back on CES and how this was received. But I'd be surprised if they ended up making a car at all. But
it's a little bit like Google has decided to start making like hardware, home devices, phones. At some point probably said no, their executives said, no, we're a search engine company, we're an internet company, we don't make stuff. And then they were like, well, wait a minute, if we make phones, we could get all this data from people. That's going to help our core business. If we have home devices, we could be listening to people 24/7 and then selling them ads using that data. So, to me, it's just, this is the same idea, only with four wheels and, propulsion system and lots of infotainment.
You make a very good point that, if we think about what's valuable in today's market, it's data. Almost everything physical that's being sold at the moment, there's a data play there. We look at Alexa. Another big thing that came out of this story or out of this show was the propagation of Alexa into different vehicles. And I look at that and I have serious, I'm sort of a skeptic of these sort of data gathering schemes anyways, but like I look at that and I have real privacy concerns. I'm also thinking at this point, each of us that owns these devices, we're producing a lot of data. We're not getting the monetary value of that data, so, basically it's just another revenue stream for these companies and a way to collate a whole bunch of data that you can create stunningly, scarily accurate profiles of people using this sort of data. The vehicle, a lot of important sensitive stuff happens in a vehicle, like where you go and You know, at some point, transactions are going to happen in your vehicle. You'll be buying stuff, having items delivered to your vehicle using like a lockbox, storage box for packages. I mean, they're already doing that with some vehicles. That part is both, I think, exciting from a convenience standpoint. You know, there are legitimate uses for that data. It's going to be helpful for autonomous vehicles to have access to that sort of data, but I don't know. What do you guys think? It just sort of sketches me out in general. I have real concerns with where this is going.
Oh, for sure. If I sit down and think about it, I hate it. But but I don't. I don't sit down and think about it. I'm just like, oh, hey, Alexa, play the song my kid likes, you know, and like, because I want to see him dance, and like, I just, you know, I just do it. It's already integrated into my life. If I stop to think about it, at this point, there's no way I could like disintegrate from all these data gathering you know, pieces of technology without, you know, completely taking myself off the grid.
It's at this point, you're on the grid whether you want to be or not. And I think every time you get something new in your life, you know, whether it's a phone, whether it's a car, it's just the base level technology that's already baked into it just kind of further gets you onto the grid.
Yeah, I've already agreed to it by purchasing the device.
And to me, that's actually a little frustrating. There's a part of me that would like to go back to, you know, simpler times, because some of the convenience, you know, I don't need everything to be voice activated, whether I'm on the road or with my phone or, you know, any home devices. For me, I don't need that, but almost everybody else does, you know, and I'm not like that much of a Luddite. Like, believe me, I like all the great things, you know, my phone and other things could do for me. But, you know, the privacy issues I think are weird. I think, yeah, I mean, to me, it also seems like even if you get past the privacy issues, which there's, to your point, John, it's just kind of, it is what it is right now. But it also seems like we should be compensated. It feels like literally as a global citizen, like your very presence is being monetized by somebody. And, you know, that's a little frustrating.
Yeah, it is. They should start giving us, you know, our phones for free and whatnot if they're gonna. I mean, but like things like Facebook and all these services we use are already free. But yeah, cars are a whole new set of data. Alex, you're laughing.
Just the idea of Facebook as a service instead of like, I don't know, a virus. Hey, like this is getting political, maybe controversial,
so,
but
we should probably. I mean, I don't know. We could keep going. I mean, it does. Yeah, I mean, you're always being tracked. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
I mean, you know, maybe this is the conversation that we should be having about CES, right? Because you know, the product is one thing, but like the trends are another, and all of the trends are leading towards. There is this trade-off. You are giving up a vast amount of data that these companies aren't securing very well. What are you getting in return? Convenience features that are not, I don't know. Like, I just don't know if they add the right amount of value. You know,
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
With one exception being, I think voice activation of infotainment and vehicle features while driving is infinitely safer than manipulating a touchscreen. And if there was a way to decouple the information mining profit model from we're going to provide a safety benefit to the consumer. If there was a way to get these systems where maybe the data was expunged immediately after going up to the cloud. So, you know, the system could process your request, but it wasn't retaining the data. I don't know. But like, every time I see a touchscreen in a car where that's the only way you can interact with it, it's maddening because that is a massive point of distraction. We have data that shows that it's bad. It's a bad thing, masquerading as something high tech and desirable. And yet, voice activation, which has a specter of what are they doing with your data, it offers a massive benefit in terms of driver safety and driver distraction. And maybe we should be thinking more about how to, I don't know. We should have a regulatory body that really can hold the automakers to account and say, you need to be able to provide this to consumers as a safety benefit without monetizing their data. That's how I feel.
Yeah, like no strings attached. Just you need to include this in your car because it's right. You don't need to, count how many clicks of the seatbelt there are when you fasten it. That's not what it's there for.
They're not monetizing mandatory backup cameras, right? So,
right.
Maybe this is it's just a reframing of the technology, but maybe it's what they should be doing.
So the name of the car is the Vision S. I think we've gone on for literally almost half an hour and not actually mentioned the name of it. It's pretty cool. And I guess we'll maybe leave it there.
It's a fascinating touchstone of CES and the greater sort of car world right now.
Yeah. I think this is actually, without intending to do this, we essentially took maybe the biggest story of the show, but used as a lens through which to view the state of the data and security and infotainment and electronics and auto industries all in one car that we didn't know existed 3 days ago.
Right.
That's kind of cool.
So I think should we talk about something less controversial?
Yes.
How about Carlos Ghosn? I don't know if that's actually less controversial, but it's less.
Oh man,
I don't know. This is actually pretty high wattage. This is awesome. This is the craziest thing.
It's fascinating, and I can't wait to see the Netflix series or movie or whatever comes of it, because it's just a crazy story. And the thing is, so he's under house arrest. He's been to jail multiple times in Japan. He's under house arrest. He's got cameras on his front door, and he somehow manages to sneak out, take a bullet train to Osaka, and then from there take an airplane to
Turkey,
and then to Lebanon. And there might have been a musical case or crate involved that he was stashed in. And, this is a high profile, globally recognized figure, and it is just so fascinating to actually finally be able to hear him talk about it, hear his side of it, because we really didn't get that when he was being detained in Japan. Man, I think his criticisms of the Japanese justice system are spot on. I would have done the exact same thing, whether I was innocent or guilty. I would not want to be in Japan's justice system right now, because you're doomed. You're doomed, almost 100%.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that. What is their conviction rate? Something it's literally 96%.
It's 99%.
Yeah.
Jeez. Wow.
And they basically, the thing that the Ghosn case highlights is that they can release and rearrest you basically indefinitely. There's sort of a loophole in their ability to detain you. So if they want, they can just keep rearresting you, holding you for a period, and releasing you without charging you. It would be something where there'd be a habeas corpus petition in the U.S. where eventually you got to charge someone to let them go. You can't hold someone indefinitely if they're not a enemy combatant. That's a whole nother thing. But in Japan, it's an amazing, we think of Japan as a modern democracy, and in some respects, they've got an incredibly, I don't know how else to put it. They've got a bad criminal justice system.
Kafkaesque.
It's one where the balance is tipped way towards presumption of guilt, to the point where who knows how many innocent people get jailed. It's hard to know. I don't know that data exists, but you couple that with just the wild story of his escape. Wasn't there a crack extraction team, some black ops group of people that cased the whole getaway thing and facilitated it? It made it sound like they hired the Mossad or something to get him out. But
yeah, I'm not sure. It had to be well,
if they were
organized.
going to Lebanon, it probably wouldn't be Mossad, but
right.
That wouldn't work out so well. But didn't you guys hear something about that? Some crack extraction team that smuggles, that's known for smuggling VIPs out of conflict zones or something like that?
Ooh, I don't know. I
don't know. I'm going to wait for the Netflix one on that. I'm just picturing Chris Pratt playing like the lead guy who is, in charge of this said team. But yeah.
I'm picturing the A-Team,
Oh, the A-Team would be awesome. The original A-Team with George Papard and
Mr. T.
Yeah, all those guys. Mr. T, yes. I don't know. This is like literally we're using like, TV and movie examples to illustrate this, but this is crazier than any of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, it's unreal. And I mean, yeah, it's, not a great commentary on Japan's justice system. That's for sure. Like to your point, Alex, the scales of justice are like, seem very out of whack there. I mean, and then what it takes is a high profile defendant like this. And, obviously every blow by blow of the case is broadcast around the world. It's national news. And some of their tactics do not look that great. Let's put it that way. That's putting it very mildly. All the like different detainings. It doesn't sound like he was really held under the greatest of circumstances. Let's put it that way.
It says something that I can sympathize with this character who's, this just seems like he was written as a villain in a movie, in a Bond movie. He's this wealthy guy, looks like Dracula, and very brusque, and like the fact that I'm like, yeah, I get it, man. I would have done the same thing. I feel ya, 100%.
But on the other hand, I don't think anyone comes out looking good in this story, right?
No.
The Nissan executive, the Japanese Nissan executives look vindictive and cutthroat.
Yeah.
Ghosn probably was doing something nefarious. Almost certainly.
Pretty shady.
Yeah. No member of the alliance looks like they were fully in the right here. Yeah, the Japanese justice system looks terrible. The countries that facilitated his escape are seeing fallout. I mean, it's like, like I think narrow lenses of this are really interesting, but in the broad picture, it's just sort of like corporate bigwigs are not necessarily great people. That's what I'm taking out of it.
No, I mean, I agree with you. Nobody looks good in this. It's who looks like less bad is, I think, the prescription. But
yeah, who has the most justification for what they're doing at the moment?
I mean, truthfully, in this case, I don't know. I may be spitballing or totally wrong here, but when you look at who's most justified, I almost would end up sympathizing with Carlos Ghosn because, let's say it is a white collar crime that he's alleged to have committed, probably did, but maybe the punishment didn't appear to be fitting the crime.
Exactly.
So he's like, I've got the means, I'm out of here. I can understand that. Whereas it seems like
it's just been escalated at every turn of the screw, basically.
Yeah. And I mean, I can sort of understand that, the executives of Nissan maybe didn't want this industrial symbol of their company like fully sold off to the French. I could get that. But, you're also essentially talking about throwing a guy in jail on like a very trumped up crime. Yeah, there's like the degrees of ethical behavior here, none of which are good. It's like, where do you put all these on the scale? I mean, I don't know. And I mean, yeah, and don't forget the French who were kind of like, oh yeah, he's in jail. Well, he's still technically our chairman. You guys remember that? He was like still the chairman of Renault for like a couple of weeks while he was in jail. And they're like, yeah, he did a pretty good job here. We're okay with that. And then it was like, they kind of like washed their hands of it and they, were like, yeah, we're going to not touch that. And
we're going to wait for the movie.
Right. We'll wait for it till, Netflix hits Paris.
I'm sure they're going to hate the movie. The French are a little arrogant about the cinema, but yeah, I like, Greg, sort of the overall point you had. Like, what does Ghosn deserve? He deserves justice. I'm not saying he deserves to be found innocent. He deserves a fair trial and fair consequences for whatever the hell he did, which is, to your point, a white collar crime. I mean, unless, he did something else. But I mean, it sounds like it's just, he was extra compensation, putting some funds into like some houses to make them like off the books.
Sketchy stock options, things like that.
It's that kind of stuff. And you know what? The punishment for that should just be like some of his money goes away, in my opinion,
Yeah, he wasn't like robbing the Nissan workers like healthcare funds or anything like that. And again, I'm not justifying it, but it's like,
Yeah.
when you look at some of the white collar crimes that have happened in this country, and like, the executives do like 2 weeks in, some place in Delaware or something that's like a golf club. This seems a bit extreme.
Yeah,
forfeit. Martha Stewart is still well loved.
Yeah, forfeit your ill-gotten gains, I say, and then whatever. I can't care too much about arch capitalists being capitalists. Like their mission is to make money, so they're making money. I mean, like, fine.
Cool. So, wow, we've data protection, late stage capitalism. Why don't we talk some cars, maybe? Yeah.
We'll find a way to make this about not cars. I'm sure the next thing we talk about.
Okay. So let's lead off with. Let's see. I spent like about 10 days in the Genesis G70. I really like that car. I know, John, you spent some time in not this one, but a car like this. Mine was the manual transmission. It was bright cherry red. It had the 2-liter turbo. I really liked it. It was fun to drive. I think it's very competitive for being what it is. I don't have the exact price because the sticker that I ripped out of the glove box actually had no price on it, but I believe it came in like roughly 40, somewhere in there. 255 horsepower, 6-speed manual. Really the downside, I would say this is, I thought the cabin, the interior was a little ho-hum. It felt a little more like it was nice. It was fine, but it felt not particularly premium. And maybe that's just because some of the materials were they were harder when they were like, shouldn't have been that hard. Some of the like more softer touch pieces felt like artificially soft. It just felt a little plain, a little more Hyundai than Genesis, which is okay. You see this in other brands for sure, but I enjoyed it, and I think it looked great.
And when you get into some of the higher trims of the Genesis, the interior quality goes up immensely. The quilted leather and things like that. It can look very beautiful depending on which boxes you check. But I love the G70 quite a bit. I went on the first drive for it, and I drove basically the car you drove on this little karting track in New Hampshire that was sort of, that they use as an autocross track for this event.
I'm pretty sure I actually drove a Dodge Challenger all-wheel drive there in the snow. But go on.
But yeah, I mean, I love the G70. This one, the one thing I didn't like about the manual transmission, it was just very very numb, very light throws, very not very satisfying. But the rest of the experience was wonderful. And the G70, I think I like it better than the Stinger. If you need more space, the back seat in the G70 is pretty small, I think. I never had to put Wally in the back of one, but I mean, I imagine you were putting Andy in the back here.
The car is pretty tight. Yeah. I mean, so we drove our SUV most of the like holiday week, but he fit back there okay. Sort of the coupe-like roofline, if you will. That makes it very hard to get a child who's just about to turn 2 in and out of. It's really good for knocking your head, getting into concussion protocol. Let's put it that way. There was actually a decent amount of room for the car seat. So if you're looking in this segment of like sort of sport luxury sedans, you can put your toddler back there. It's not great, but it's not the worst. I do think this car looks very good looking. I think it's beautiful. I wrote down just in the scribble here, which appears to be some like maybe whiskey on this napkin I wrote on, but I felt like Genesis has been here before, and they haven't. That's what felt so remarkable to me about this car is, does it have some flaws? Sure, in my opinion, but it's not like like a poser car or a car that's like overdone, overwrought. It's got all this, like they put a crazy amount of horsepower in it, or all this gaudy like leather or flashy design, or just tuned it to be way severe or way soft. It drove pretty well. It looked pretty good. I mean, I was very impressed with the overall execution. And I think that's really a credit to them that they could get a car in this segment right, essentially the first time out. I mean, the design, like the chrome door handles, that grill, the grill straight up reminded me of like something out of the 60s. Not literally, but the notion of it. The way the grill was big, front and centered, kind of low to the ground. The bumper was very subtle. This is the kind of stuff you used to see like Mercedes and Jaguars get right, in a different period. And I really came away impressed with the overall demeanor of it. It's a crowded field. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of different things you could, this competes against, from the 3 Series to the C-Class, I guess the Jaguar XE, Cadillac. I don't know about ATS. They don't make those at the moment, or maybe they won't be shortly. But all those like sort of size sports sedans are very viable, very competitive, very good in their own way. This also, I think you start to look at, some of the Infinities and Acuras as well. Obviously, maybe those are perhaps its more natural competitors, but it can stand on its own 2 feet. Is it better than like the C-Class? Of course not. Does it have the cachet of 3 Series? Of course not. Probably not even of just the Cadillac, but it was good. And a lot of people, when I said, hey, it's a Genesis, they were either people who, if they knew cars, a lot of times I would get the, sort of like the flat O with, the vowels trailing off. But if they didn't know cars, I generally get the, like they had no idea what Genesis was. Right. And it sounds cool. So there's a lot of car brands out there today. I think in hindsight, this may have been a pretty good move by Hyundai to try and create a separate image for its luxury vehicles.
I was giving a tour of the New York Auto Show to some, I think they're an agency that Verizon works with or something, and they were somehow associated with Audi. I was giving them a tour, and we go by a Genesis, and they're kind of like laughing, scoffing, like, what's this all about? Are they the real deal? And I was like, man, I really like the cars I've driven from them, and their jaws sort of dropped when I was telling them just how awesome the car is and how much I liked it and how it blends comfort, it feels very sporty at the same time. Like, it's really fun. It's really stable. I drove it on a track. I drove the biturbo V6 version on a larger track. And it's very, very capable, and it's fun, and I liked spending time in it, and as long as I wasn't in the back seat.
Yeah, I spent no time in the back seat other than unloading, children. But I guess if you're Audi and you have that much history, you can sort of scoff for a little bit. But I don't know. I wouldn't do that too long. Yeah. It's a really good car. I've driven A4s lately that are solid, but no A4 has knocked my socks off lately. The Alfa Romeo Giulia is like an interesting entry in this segment. If you're really into like Italian cars and can live with some shortcomings, let's put it that way. But it's a passionate segment, let me put it that way.
For sure.
It seems like Genesis is like making a strong statement.
Yeah, I think so. They're not going to, steal anyone's lunch money today, but
they're not getting laughed out of the cafeteria. Let's put it that way.
Good point. Yeah.
Well,
any thoughts on this, Alex? Unless
you look at the sales numbers.
Well, yeah.
Genesis, like if you sneeze, in the amount of time that you sneeze, Nissan sells more Rogues than all of the Genesises combined, like since they started being produced. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but like these things are unsaleable. They're hitting a market where, if the G70 had come out like right when the first generation CTS came out, and then they rolled out the crossovers pretty soon after that, and they'd caught that last wave of like real consumer interest in entry level luxury sedans. I don't know, maybe this just seems like they got the timing super, super wrong. They're producing a really compelling product in a segment where, it's like tumbleweeds. It's less than tumbleweeds. It's like one sad cricket.
They didn't have, and they didn't really have the dealership thing worked out very well when they started rolling out
That's a great point. This is a car that reeks of direct to consumer, if that could ever be a business model. Because I think maybe by selling it almost like using a very unconventional sales tactic, that might help them reach a new audience that they need to reach to get critical mass. I mean, you know, when I'm speaking of this narrowly in a vacuum, really enjoyed my time in the car. But you bring up some good points about the business case, which is in this oversaturated luxury market, people don't really like mid or smallish sports sedans.
In the Genesis story, I mean, from the get-go, this has been kind of a misbegotten, you know, thing. You had the original two Genesis models, which were Hyundais, and then you had the Equus, and then you had the Genesis branded things where they were being sold by Hyundai dealers, and the Hyundai dealers didn't want to sell them. They wanted to sell 5 Sonatas in the same amount of time. And then Genesis was fighting with the dealers, trying to build out, you know, like standalone sort of sub experiences. Just like, you guys should have stopped right at the beginning and rolled the damn thing out right. Because, you know, the fumbled launch of this sort of brand that slowly evolved from something else has just been bad, you know. And like, I don't know that turns off a consumer right now, but like, it definitely didn't help in terms of building buzz or momentum or whatever. I mean, this thing, it feels kind of DOA, especially since the crossover is not due until like what, early next year? I mean, does anyone recall offhand when that crossover is hitting?
I don't.
Let me look it up.
No,
but it's not soon enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think you're seeing with Cadillac too, is, you know, they had these like Nürburgring conquering sedans for years and years, and we loved them. You know, they're like, they'd consistently win comparison tests and, you know, rate well. Usually they'd get dinged for their interiors and cube, but overall they'd be pretty good cars. And then, you know, boom, nobody was buying them. And that's why, you know, we live in a world where there's like X4s and X6s because, you know, if you package it as a crossover and it's what the brand people are comfortable with, they're willing to like make that trade-off, even if it means driving with like I literally just got out of the X6. Maybe this is a future podcast, but that looks like the Cybertruck. Like the back end is so severe, you can't see out of it. An ambulance was flying up behind me, and I literally didn't see it because it was so severe. But it's a crossover. It has a business case. Yada yada yada. Genesis probably needs to, you know, get on a little bit more of solid footing.
Everyone's getting rid of their sedans and they're starting out with them.
yeah, that's a questionable case. But in some ways, to be fair, I think time probably, like, the ground shifted under them quickly.
Yeah.
And
sure.
I mean, to be fair, maybe they should have seen it coming. You know, if you're going to launch a business, you got to look at the headwinds. But
they totally should have seen it coming. And even if sedan sales are falling off, they're not totally dead. I mean, you have a compelling small crossover in the lot. Some small fraction is going to show up to the lot, look at that, and then buy a G70. Maybe it's because there's a stack of cash on the hood, but I don't know. Hey, by the way, the crossover is a GV80. It's going on sale in South Korea in January, with other markets following. Again, which just shows you that with these Korean brands, I feel like sometimes they get the emphasis wrong. Sell this first in America, where crossovers are hot and the brand is struggling, and then bring it to the home market later. But you could just knowing the way that Korean manufacturers work, they would never even entertain that idea.
Never do that.
They would never in a million years do that. So maybe that's why Genesis is in the situation it is now. Don't understand the important market.
Well, if they can get their feet under them a little bit, let's see. We got their sales figures from last year. In 2018, they sold 10,300 cars here. In 2019, they sold double that, 21,000. And, the G70, once that started going, that made up the bulk of it. You know, they sold 12,000 G70s last year. And then G80 and G90 were flat at, around 7,000 for the G80 and around 2,200 for the G90 both years. So it's clear it's the G70 that people want of those, but.
And those numbers probably don't look too bad if you consider Infiniti yearly sales, which are also pretty terrible, but that's an established brand. And so, yeah, if you put it in that's a tenable business at 20,000 cars a year. You just need the SUV. You need the crossover.
Yeah. Agreed.
So speaking of SUVs and crossovers, Alex, you spent some time in the Chevy Blazer. This is, been out for a little while, and it's finally appeared in your driveway. What'd you think of it?
I don't know if you can hear that long, slow exhale on the recording, but
we need to play that up a little bit, amplify it.
Man, it is just okay. Like, I was so underwhelmed in general, and it's so expensive. These are criticisms we've leveled at it before. The idea is that it's like the Chevy Murano, right? It's kind of a sporty thing, a sporty two-row crossover that sort of carries some of the company's sports car heritage into a crossover. And man, I just was super not excited about it. It's like it was inspired by the parts of the Camaro that I don't like the weird infotainment downward angled thing, and the rotate the bezel and the vent to change the temperature. Just all the weird stuff. Don't put that in a consumer crossover. I don't know. It just seemed like a thing, right? Like Chevy got a brief. Hey, there's a slight gap in between two other crossovers. Slap something in there, and they just kind of designed it by committee. So I wasn't a huge fan of it. And it was expensive. I don't have the Monroney for the one I drove handy, but I want to say it was like upper mid level trim, and it was like $45,000. I mean, it was.
Man,
let me.
That's not great.
Let me go to the configurator and see if I can actually sort of reconstruct what I drove, because I don't have it right now. I had it a week or two ago. So
I have driven I was going to call it the Forester, the Blazer, like literally one night. I feel like we've had maybe one come through the office, which seems kind of odd for a fairly high profile car. But I mean, I thought it was fine. I liked how it looks. I think a lot of people don't. I think it looks pretty good, but yeah, for me, the price was pretty high. I don't remember offhand. I was actually trying to find an old tweet I put out on this, because it was like 40 something, somewhere in that ballpark you mentioned, Alex. And I got all this reaction. People thought it was crazy. And I remember thinking, geez, yeah, that's an expensive SUV. So, I mean, to me, just the driving experience it was fine. It was okay. Better than some, not as good as others. I like the design, but again, to each his own on that front. But yeah, they're expensive.
Yeah, I'm reconstructing. It was an RS trim, which is reasonably high up, and with the packages it had, it was about 46. MSRP was about 46 before destination. And I don't know. I maybe they don't sell for that. I mean, that's sort of an American vehicle thing, is that the MSRP isn't, they then use a lot of incentives to actually move them down the road. So MSRP isn't really reflective of transaction prices more than like Japanese vehicles, but it just strikes me as high. It strikes me as high for a two-row crossover in this genre anyways. I mean, I don't know.
I've been kind of surprised. I expected to see more of them on the road, especially here around Detroit. I thought it would be, pretty popular among the Detroit GM crowd. It's not. I don't see them very often at all. Although I've criticized the looks on this podcast in the past. I did see one in white recently, and I liked it.
You're mellowing on the looks, okay? Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, I think that that's telling that you don't even see them here.
Well, Detroit is. This might sound weird. This is a very heavy Jeep market. Like, everybody who wants like a nice crossover and is connected to a car company or as a supplier uses like said connection and gets like a Grand Cherokee with as many gizmos on it as they can get. Like, literally, I'm going to look out the window. There's a Grand Cherokee. and there's a Grand Cherokee, and like literally there's probably one around the corner. I mean, that's just, it's really interesting, that observation, because this is totally a bubble. You know, it's obviously a domestic bubble with, you know, also I'd say a pretty like strong luxury component too. Like, you know, people do buy Mercedes and BMWs, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, did you do anything cool in the Blazer besides think of your old Blazer?
It did make me think of my old Blazer, which I actually kind of liked. It was a two-door 4-wheel drive, which was kind of cool. But I mean, I just drove it around, and I mean, it was fine. It's just kind of lackluster transmission, kind of a coarse V6. You know, it's all of the like things that you would expect in a contemporary GM crossover, and the interior just wasn't that cool. And yeah, you know what? The exterior actually did look pretty good. It was a super dark blue. It did kind of pop in that super dark blue. But like, I just pulled up the Lexus website. Like an RX starts at 44. So, you know, the Blazer's a real hard sell to me when I can get like a much more established, like a luxury vehicle in the same size class for 44 to start. So yeah, it's kind of how I feel. You know, bottom line, probably should get something else if you want a two-row crossover, unless you just get a screaming deal on it. But I mean, you'd have to put like $10,000 in the hood of this RS for me to even like give it a second thought. So, you know.
Wow.
Well, I think too, when you get into the two-row, not just the Blazer, but you know, any expensive two-row SUV, you can get a three-row SUV should you need it for under 40 somewhat easily. You know, maybe you might have to, you know, be an aggressive, you know, price shopper and shop the sales, if you will. But, you know, I didn't find a ton of utility with the Blazer. To me, it felt more like, you know, almost like you could get one car seat in there pretty comfortably. You could get two in there if you have to, and it's fine, but things get a little tighter. Cargo hold was okay. It was fine. You know, it wasn't remarkable, but, you know, you could put stuff back there. So I don't know. For me, I just kept coming back to like, I think it looks cool, but overall it's fine.
Hey, let me just point out one other thing that I think is even more of a direct competitor: the Honda Passport, which is, you know, the two-rowified Pilot, which is sportier than the Pilot and occupies, in my mind, the exact same consumer niche, starts at 31 or 32, basically. Okay. Like I give me a $32,000 Passport all day and all night over a base Blazer. So
yeah, agreed.
Tough crowd, basically.
Looks like a base Blazer starts at 28. So if you want a really basic one, you could get one. But you know, I wonder what a $28,000 Blazer looks like.
I can just picture all the plastic.
Yeah. So on that note, cleanse your mind. The Hyundai Santa Fe. We both just drove that. It's okay. Nice.
I liked it quite a bit.
You liked it quite a bit?
Yeah. Yeah. It's it feels pretty refined. You know, the looks I could completely forgettable. But
so I like the looks. I thought it looked pretty good.
I mean, they're not bad. I just don't think there's a lot of character there. I don't know. That grill's kind of cool, but just
you don't think that the lower driving lights, upper running lights thing sets it apart? I think it makes it look pretty interesting. It doesn't. Does it seem played out to you now, John?
No. If I think about it, you know, on an intellectual level, it looks nice. But if I'm just passing it on the street, I pay it no mind whatsoever.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It just sort of blends in.
And the rear is really boring. I'm looking at photos now.
But I really like all the tech that's inside of it. Just, you know, a ton of content. This one had that safety system that we tested out on the Kia Telluride Hyundai Palisade, where it shows your blind spot when you use the turn signal in the instrument cluster right in front of you. Which I found that, you know, the more I used it, the more I came to appreciate it. I could, you know, see my blind spot. I was still checking over my shoulders out of habit, but then once I did the check, I could, you know, I didn't have to check again because I just had the feed right in front of me, and it was really made driving in traffic a lot easier. The driver assist in there it works really well. The adaptive cruise control works really well. It kept really nice space without leaving too much space, so people are cutting in front of you all the time. Really smooth acceleration, really smooth braking on cruise control, and then the lane departure and lane keep assist was not overly aggressive at all, which was really sort of refreshing. And the car itself, depending on the drive mode, different drive modes were actually like distinctly different. I put it in the comfort mode, and I actually liked comfort mode. Usually comfort mode in most cars, I can't stand it. But I kept it in comfort mode a good amount of the time, and it was actually comfortable without, throttling the acceleration, and it was nice to drive. It makes me think that, my wife, and this might be a good spend my money at some point, but my wife is looking at 3-row vehicles, and she's considering she wants to test drive the Subaru Ascent, and begrudgingly will test drive the Telluride and the Hyundai Palisade. And me driving this is like, man, if she gets behind the wheel and drives this, I think she's gonna love it. I mean, the all the content that's right there in like and then the moonroof is huge and beautiful, and it's just a really nice place to spend time, especially in the driver's seat. If you don't care about sporty driving, really, and if you're buying something in this segment, you probably don't, then it's a really nice driving experience.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't dislike it. I didn't love it, didn't hate it. It didn't deeply resonate with me. I think it was a solid vehicle, though. Yeah. I was a little warmer on the looks maybe than you were. I think it looks pretty good. It's good on the expressway. It's, as far as just like, we went from basically one side of town to the other, which is a good like 45-mile jaunt in this area. We went to a family party, and, my son was able to fall asleep. I thought the road noise and the wind noise, for just like a mainstream brand, I thought the cabin was pretty quiet, actually. I was somewhat impressed with that. Infotainment electronics were pretty good. Materials were like, whatever. It was fine. To me, it's just a really crowded segment. So there's lots of different things in there. But I mean, I will say this, I voluntarily was like, I had my pick of whatever I wanted for last weekend, and I took this because I wanted to spend like a family weekend in a SUV like this. And, from that standpoint, it certainly is up to the task. I mean, if you're in the market, basically I would say if you're in the market for whatever you're in the market for, checking out whatever Hyundai is in the segment, you're going to be probably really impressed with the value. The product may not be what you like, but the value is there. And the Santa Fe did feel like a very good value to me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I like the interior on this one too. There's that little sort of cargo tray in the passenger side of the dash. Not the hugest fan of the sort of monolithic tablet style infotainment, but the infotainment itself was really good to use. And did you notice like the weird sort of geometrical 3D pattern on the speakers? I think this had the upgraded audio, and it had that sort of weird.
Well, I didn't notice that. I noticed the audio sounded pretty good.
Yeah.
Rocked out to several satellite stations. But yeah.
Yeah. Driving this, just makes me want to say, hey, Kat, my wife, you have to consider the Hyundai and the Kia, because just what you get for your money it's really satisfying to get all this content and have it all work well too.
Well, maybe since we're considering things, we should spend some money.
Sounds good.
We got a good one this week. This is a previous Spend My Money writer. I like the way he sort of, his the subject line is fun dilemma. So we got a new word, fun lemma. Okay. Basically, before we talked him out of buying an older Turbo Cayenne, ended up getting a CX-5. So you guys might remember this. Listeners, you might remember this. Now he's looking for a toy car. This is when it gets fun. We get to help people buy these.
The fun ones, yeah.
The fun ones, right. Currently has a 14 Porsche Cayman base.
Nice.
I went on the launch of that car. That was a lot of fun. And it replaced a 1999 Miata. Best fun versus dollar I've ever spent. Okay, I believe he's referring to the Mazda. Here's where it gets tricky for him. He wanted to love the Cayman so much, but I just don't. And I can't pinpoint why. It truly bothers me that I just can't love this thing and drive it for the next 10 years, but I just want to drown it in a river. Okay. Wow. Hope you've got some insurance. Basically, he is looking for, a new toy car. He's a car enthusiast like us. Some of the things that are on the short list, M2 Audi TT RS. I went on the launch of that. That's fun if you like a 5-cylinder engine. Golf R, Chevy Corvette. You could probably get a good deal on the last gen, and the mid-engine one's pretty great. STI. So he's like wide open, number of price points and, the ethos of the car itself. Basically he hasn't bonded with the Cayman because he hasn't admittedly done like a track day or an autocross sort of thing. So, that's it. He says, help him. Let's help him.
Well, let's see. If you're not liking the Cayman, I feel like it's the M2 is going to be even more dull to you. I don't know if it's dull. What just
artificial?
Yeah. The TTRS is really cool. Really cool. But and that one feels pretty different from a lot of the other cars. But I think the Corvette stands out to me quite a bit. That always, every time I drive it, feels unlike anything else out there, and it's always super fun, and it's got tons of character.
7 or 8.
Either. I mean, depends on what you want to spend. I haven't driven the 8 yet, but 7's perfectly good.
Yeah, that's a very Kierstein-like answer, actually. It seems like lately, when in doubt, you've gone with Corvette on Spend My Monies.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
Well, I'm making some assumptions here, but it sounds like if the Miata was great in his mind, the NB Miata was great in his mind, and the Cayman he's not in love with, that strikes me as being a problem that has to do with it not feeling as analog. For that generation Cayman, there's a lot of systems that are in play and a lot of careful engineering that makes it feel like you're a superstar. But if you actually know how to drive, if you're in tune with sort of really what the car is doing, you realize how much of it is the car doing it for yourself. And I did, when I was at a different publication, we did a big car roundup, performance car roundup. And so I had a Cayman out on an airport test track with a whole bunch of other cars. I think it was actually probably a 14. It was very similar model year. And the first time you go out, you feel like a superstar. And the second time you go out, you're like, all the other stuff I drove, like I felt stuff. And in this one, it's like, it's sort of not there. It was dialing out a lot of the feedback that the other cars provide in order to make you feel like a better driver. So I totally get where this guy's coming from, and I agree with him. And I think the Corvette, since he's suggesting it, is great. And I've always described the C7 as sort of like a giant Miata because it does a lot of the things a Miata does. It feels direct and immediate in a lot of ways the Miata does, but it's bigger and V8 and just, and there's no replacement for displacement. The LT1 is a great engine. It's not my favorite GM engine, but it's a great engine. Some of the Z06s had an LS7, and if you want to have like even more awesome for like a less good interior and exterior experience, an LS7 powered C6 would be amazing. or a Zeta Camaro Z28, which had that same engine and those amazing multimatic dampers. That's really cool too. Also, I think if you're really looking for something analog and interesting, it's hard to beat an Elise, a late production Elise.
Ooh.
They are, I mean, you got to like tinkering, because out of the box, like bone stock, there's stuff you want to address. The shift linkage sucks. There are aftermarket fixes for that. The clamshell can crack on the stock hinges in certain years, and like that's expensive. So you get a different kind of hinge. I mean, it's all like the forums have all the fixes figured out. You just have to sort of know where to look. But a sorted Elise, I've driven it was probably like an 08 or an 09 Elise, just awesome. That really scratches sort of like what I really want. I want to cater them. So just to give you my my sickness is that my answer to this question would be, well, obviously a cater them, but like not everyone wants to have it, be a torture chamber. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Corvette's the easy answer. Elise maybe the harder answer. Cater them being the like, so you're a masochist.
I drove in a Lotus Exige, and man, it was a completely transcendental drive. It just, I mean, talk about being one with the car. That is it. And it's tricky getting in and out of it, especially if you're tall. You're sitting way down in the tub, but boy, man, it will get your heart pumping. You feel everything that car is doing.
I like the idea of an Exige. I'm throw one other idea out there, and this is more of a DIY thing. Find a 996 911 that's mechanically sorted, doesn't have an IMS bearing issue, and throw some suspension at it and make it basically a handling clone of the 996 GT3. 996 GT3s are unbelievable. They're everything that you just described with an Elise, but like next level amazing. But with the Metzger motor, they're like more than $100,000. Like they're just hard to get. People want them. Not many came here. So I think doing that on the cheap, if you're not totally burned by the Porsche experience, a 996 with a lot of aftermarket handling stuff would be really, really, really fun.
As you read farther down on his email, there's some things I actually can't say on the air. It does sound like he may be burned a little by the Porsche experience.
True.
But maybe open to experiencing it. I'll jump in real quick. I'm all over the place on this. What came to mind here for me was the Shelby GT350. If you want a raw experience, but you can also drive the Mustang, maybe not as a true daily driver, but you could drive it and it won't abuse you by the minute. And it's a really cool car. And I think that's a pretty, very analog experience if you want it to be. I wouldn't spend the money to get the 500. I think the 350 is all that you need. So that would be my vote. I think, I was looking at different Jaguar F-types, which that's not really an analog car, but it's just, he's looking for a toy car. And to me, an F-type is really a toy car. It's a beautiful car. It can be powerful. There's, that's something else to consider. Here's another weird one that I think is actually probably like too inexpensive. But when you look at a real analog experience outside of a Miata, Subaru BRZ is pretty basic. It's engaging. It's fun. Or of course a Toyota 86. If that might be a fun car just to try out. If you like the Miata, you might like this. And it doesn't sound like money is much of a constraint. Go to your Subaru Toyota dealer and be like, I want, and just get everything you want on that car. And, that could be interesting too. It's not going to, as far as like rip your head off power. Yeah, forget it. But it's a good chassis. It's a good transmission. I think they look pretty good. So it's something else to consider. I
don't love the FA20 in that with the stock tune especially, but there are a couple of fixes. You can get a tune without changing any of their hardware, and that'll make it drive better just around town. You could also do an EJ255 swap. That's a 2.5 liter WRX motor, and then you have all sorts of aftermarket stuff that you can do to it too. And that would be, that's like a parts bin hot rod kind of thing, like where you wouldn't really be losing too much reliability. You're just sort of you're adding and subtracting Subaru components to a vehicle that already has a Subaru engine. But I really like your GT350 idea, Greg. What about the older the Boss 302, the stick axle Boss 302s? I've driven one of those on the track, and I giggled the entire time. It's so easy to just have a riot in one of those. That that might be more of a budget choice. I think low mile Boss 302 Laguna Secas are like under 30 now. And that's a collector car for sure moving forward.
That's a good deal too, actually. I mean, I think you're going to see those maybe bottom out for a little bit, then probably go back up. That was a very significant car for Ford too. I mean, if you're looking for something that does have, a real image play and something you could keep, I mean, there's nothing like saying you've got a Boss 302 in the garage.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're wonderful. Well, so far, that might be like a straight across trade too. If he's looking to trade, I don't know if hand what a 14 Cayman is worth, but it's worth a thought.
Well, we've done what we always do, which is say, okay, here's one option, then here's like 5 more. But do write us back. Let us know what you think. We're happy to digest this again, give it another diagnosis. And if you end up picking any of these or something else, we'd love to hear it. So let us know. Thanks for writing, and thanks to everybody else for listening. That's all the time we have this week on the Autoblog Podcast. We'll see you next week, where we will break down more from CES with some of the people who were there. That'll be episode 610. This was 609. Be safe out there. Have a great week.